Hey, it's Dave Bauer.
And this is Brian Mertens, and you're listening to ReWilding Conversations.
Good afternoon. Hi, Brian.
Hey, how's it going?
It's an interesting day. It's cool, 40 degrees here in Buffalo, New York. Hoping I get a bike ride in this afternoon. And otherwise, very exciting time. Very exciting time. Yep. Have an opportunity to do a big gig here in Western New York for my children's author work, something called the Western New York Children's Expo. And it's beginning to get pretty exciting because the event occurs November 11. It's an all-day gig here in Buffalo. And people fly in from all over the country, authors do, to partake. So it's a fun, exciting month.
Very cool. That's exciting.
Yeah. How about you? What's up?
Yeah, we're getting a sunny day here. It's a little bit cool, but yesterday we had a tropical storm come through, so we got a lot of wind and a lot of rain. It's fairly normal for this time of year. So
they said in the local paper that in the States, Maine got hit the hardest. They had 130 mile an hour wind recorded in one of the mountains of Maine, the highest point in Maine. It probably was the same system that you experienced.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we usually get a few storms like that every fall, and so we haven't had a really big one in a few years, though. The last really big one that we had was Hurricane Juan. That did a lot of damage, but we've been, I guess, having good luck the last few years. Haven't even lost power really this year. So,
well, let's keep our fingers crossed that others in the country have the same, in the continent have the same benefits, because we do know that regrettably we live in a time where the erratic nature of climate will manifest for many, many years. But let's hope that we get better as a species on helping those out, because inevitably there will be many in the years to come that will be experiencing the challenges and the hardships of climate change.
Yeah. Cool. So, we're hopping into an interesting topic today, looking at intergenerational experiences in, the mentoring experience, and I think this is a really cool topic. It's one that I haven't talked about too much in the past, like in a really formal way, but I know that it's a big interest of yours. So, what excites you about this topic, Dave?
Okay, well, we're going to go back and forth as we always do, but I'll take an early stab at it. So we have tremendous wisdom that resides within the persona of the elder in any culture. And what I'm really discovering as I get into my early years of elderhood is that I'm really excited about how I see it manifest. I really get very excited. In fact, my children's book, What's Under That Rock, Papa, is a manifestation of intergenerational nature connection. So when I'm in the presence of my grandchildren, to make it very real, Sri and Kai, they gift me with remarkable opportunities that I wouldn't have thought of, because they're experiencing my backyard or the walk in nature or my local creek very differently than I am. And I experience it very differently than they do. So when you get the intersection of two different kind of generations, two places in life, really cool synergistic things happen. And it's a real gift. What I have discovered, and what I could discover every time I share time with younger children, is I'm gifted in a novel way and very unexpected way each time I come together with a young child, and I gift them in spontaneous, not planned episodes of experience that only occur when we're with each other. As I said in a recent article that I submitted, FaceTime is cool. There's no doubt about it. Elders and grandparents and aunts and uncles from a distance can experience their grandchildren and younger children through FaceTime technology. And I am absolutely certain that it's a much, much deeper, richer, long-term benefit when those persons are live with each other, and not limiting it to a FaceTime-like experience. So let me stop there, because I can go on and on and on with this topic, and I really want to be elegant about frequently coming back and forth today. So I may have said something that catalyzes some curiosity in your world, Brian. So how about a brief pass back to you?
Yeah. Well, for me, I guess my first sort of formal introduction to the idea of the sort of gifts that elders bring to a nature connection interaction started, through reading about Tom Brown Jr. That was like one of my first introductions to this whole idea of nature connection and developing awareness in the outside world. And what the Tom Brown Jr. books, if for anyone who's listening, if you haven't read them, they're great books. I mean, I know a lot of people have been very, very inspired by these books, and they sort of center around stories that Tom shares about his experiences growing up with an elder named Stalking Wolf, and there's all kinds of controversy about what parts of the stories are actually true and what parts he sort of made up, or I don't know necessarily. I don't have the actual knowledge to be able to say what's true and what's not, but I think the thing that always stood out to me about those books was just that there is something like a historical common thing throughout time where there's like this archetype of the wise elder that's sharing all this knowledge and wisdom, and so I think that's kind of one thing, sort of how I got my introduction to it, and it's sort of like almost like a romanticized version of it. But then my first actual experience with this sort of thing was when I went to Wilderness Awareness School, and the school there, it's in the Seattle area, and they have the primitive shelter on the land there where they do all their classes, and we spent a lot of time sitting around the fire there with the elders. They had an elders council at the school, and they would come in, every once in a while to basically witness our stories. And I think that there is something really, really powerful about having those elders coming together in an intentional way to listen and to ask questions, and basically, it's kind of like that there's these two sides to the nature connection journey. There's the stuff that happens when you're out on the landscape engaging with the birds and the animals and the plants, and you're having experiences in nature. But then, on the other side of it, there's this internal journey that we go on, and there's something that happens when we get together around the fire and actually share the stories, and there's all these people who a lot of the elders at the school there, they have been practicing the skills for and also living their lives for 10, 20, 30 years, and of course their lives, they're sort of after age 60 is kind of my sense of the sort of age range, it's just it's really cool to see how that community weaves elders into their adult programs. They weave them into their kids' programs. They have an elders council that they talk about things that are happening in the community, and they play a really important role in the community. And everyone is focused on bringing up the members of that community in a really good way. And so, it's just it's really cool to see how all the different layers come together just by incorporating the aspect of elders.
Yeah. So what have we seen? You know, we look back in history and we see Native people who do just what you said, who sit among multi-generational groups, including elders, and there's this synergistic listening to the young, having the young listen to the older, and many traditions and truths have been passed across many generations this way. I think nature is a vehicle by which we can recreate a much healthier centuries-old tradition in modern-day life. In the Western world, we have seen evidence for some time now of the denigration of the elder person in our families and in our communities. And through getting an elder outdoors with a child, really cool things happen, and it doesn't have to be a deeply rigorous experience for either group. So one of the things that I've discovered is, what's the cost of telling a story with an elder or having an elder tell you a story? There's no cost. So in a world where financing and money seems such an urgent component of modern life, that's off the landscape. That's not part of the picture. Take a walk, be with a grandchild or a child, and there's almost no cost. You can make that experience be in their backyard, in your backyard, by your creek, in your park. You can walk to these places, and the financing of it goes away. So that's one of the benefits. Clearly a benefit. So another piece. Go ahead, Brian. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, let me know if this takes us off track, because I do want to hear what you were going to say there. But I'll just share a quick story, and then I have a question for you.
Okay, great.
So this is I think one of the things that really struck me about the time at Wilderness Awareness School is how they talked about that they were they said, we're training you in all these things. We're training you in naturalist skills. We're training you in animal tracking. We're training you in how to work with kids, how to actually do the mentoring. They taught us all these different skills as part of our normal class day. But then they really emphasized the fact, I remember in one particular experience, they said, what we're really training you to do, and this is speaking to a class of people, anywhere between 30 adults between the ages of, 20 and 60. And it's a real mix of people in the class. And they said, what we're really training you to do is to be elders, because it's the elders that really have the ability to inspire the future generations. They're the ones that they've seen the past, and they have the ability to see things that other people don't. And so I think that's a really interesting mindset for everyone to think about, that no matter what age you are, whether you're actually approaching elderhood as we normally might define it in terms of age, or if you're even a young person, because I definitely, I'm 29 years old. Someday I do want to be an elder. I actually see myself as moving in that direction because I want to give back to my community in that way. And so I wanted to, just throw this question out and see if you have any thoughts, or at least have it percolating there. What would you say to someone who is, maybe they're in a later stage of life, and they're like, I want to be this elder for my grandkids, or for the kids in my life, or even someone who's younger and just looking forward, saying, how do I become the best possible elder? What would you say to those people as far as guidance about helping them to step into that role?
Wow. First of all, that it's really easy, number one. So if there's fear or hesitancy, maybe ask the person, what's stopping you, right? And we've talked a little bit about that in the previous conversation, what might be stopping you, but address it to the elder. Because what's really light about this is do it in a way that's comfortable for you first. I think oftentimes the elder thinks, I have to be young and agile and nimble and keep up with. So they put down, they almost denigrate themselves in terms of having this really unique gift and capacity of being with the child. What I invite even a 20-year-old to be, you're with a younger child, you're 20 years old, get still, get quiet. Let the child know you are there and present to them, and say, hey, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What do you notice? So asking a few intriguing, open-ended questions of the child. And now you're on. Now from here on, the synergy is emerging, because they're going to take you, they're going to lift something up, they're going to smell, they're going to hear things that you just aren't hearing in this moment. And you build on that. So some cool things just will pop up if you just let the child lead. Because there may be fear. What do you mean let the child lead? How do I let the child lead? You get still, you get quiet, you invite a few curious questions depending on where you are. You're in a local space that you know. Go someplace. Be with the child in a space that you've come to know. If it's a local park, great. If it's a nature preserve that you've gone to, great. But start someplace that you have physical comfort in, because the child will explore parts of it that you have kind of forgotten are right there in front of you. So just comfort and ease and gentleness and curiosity. Come to the experience curious, but don't come to the experience feeling you've got to tell or show the child anything in particular, because in that case, you add a burden to the experience that might not benefit you or the child. Just come in a curious way. So let me pause here so that it's kind of the back and forth thing. And there's many more things I'll say during today's conversation, but I hope I addressed your question.
Yeah, that was great. And I was just reflecting as you were sharing there on just how beneficial it is for, whether in an informal way in like your own household, or in a more formal education setting, to have elders integrated with the program. I mean, the work that I do, I work with a lot of people who are they're starting nature schools, or they're putting together programs for either a formal education system or even like hobby programs. And I think that being able to integrate elders with those kinds of programs, one of the big challenges that like a nature school always has is like, where do I find people to create my community, like and actually have things held together in a really solid way. There's a kind of listening and a certain kind of energy that happens when you really get a community of people together around nature connection. And it's interesting how a lot of the elders in the world can, they still remember a time before there was, a lot of the really like crazy technology that we have these days, like phones and, all this stuff that's constantly distracting us. They remember a time when they, in their own childhood, going out and just freely playing in the forest. And they might not even see themselves as like a naturalist or like someone who knows a lot about nature, but just the fact that they had a childhood that involved, rather than playing Super Nintendo or whatever gaming system, a lot of television, they spent time in the woods. That's like an amazing foundation. And if you can get those people into your programs, and every community, there's elders everywhere, people who have the potential to really play an important support role. If you can weave those people in and find ways of connecting them with your students, that's a really great way to just get these nature schools to the next level and start to get those connections forming.
I think you make a great point, and it builds on where I was going or where I went. The elders have been in nature as very, very young child. They have the neural pathways already there. They're latent, and they may be a bit dormant because perhaps the elder isn't revisiting that organic nature play they did as a child. But when the child accompanies you again outside, almost instantly there's recollection. Almost instantly the cognitive pathways that have laid there fire up again, and a level of excitement emerges in the elder that the child feels. They feel it. And you gift the child with what you have as a treasure that the modern child may never experience except in your company, because you had it. You didn't have to pay for it. So often people will tell me, yeah, we just went up to the park and played ball all day, or we just hung out in the woods all day, and there was a comfort and an ease. There's a remarkable quote that I know I haven't shared on this program yet, so I'm gonna step to my computer while we're talking. I'm confident that people remember me mentioning Richard Louv, Children in Nature Network. So if this is not somebody you've ever done a little work on, Richard Louv, L-O-U-V, Last Child in the Woods was his most famous piece, but he's written a lot since then. So let me just read this, share this with you. So this is such a gift, so eloquent. Given a chance, a child will bring the confusion of the world to the woods, wash it in the creek, and turn it over to see what lives on the unseen side of that confusion. In nature, a child finds freedom, fantasy, and privacy, a place distant from the adult world, a separate piece. So when we are in the presence of this little remarkable rock star, these little children, they find remarkable healing and psychological insight when they're in nature. They're wired for it. And the elder did that as a young person. They remember that, the moments of quiet eloquence of sitting in nature, being, sit spots, right? We call them, you and I refer to them as sit spots in our vernacular, Brian. Well, the elders didn't call them sit spots. They were just hanging out in a tree or whatever, or checking out something really cool. It's just really a synergistic gift back and forth that the elder and the child can experience. And since it's Halloween here, and today's Halloween, and people will be out on the streets tonight. It's a bit cool and damp, unfortunately. They're not going to hit it. It's a bit windy and cool here in Buffalo, New York. But So a year ago, there was a pumpkin sitting by the creek a few doors from my home. And Sri and Kai and I walked to the creek, and we saw, someone left a pumpkin. That's odd. They didn't carve it. They just left the whole pumpkin. So what did I do? I said, hey, I wonder what would happen. Hey, come over and lift this pumpkin. Lift it up. And they both lifted it. Wow, Papa, it's really heavy. Oh, I go, yeah, right? So if we threw this pumpkin in the creek, what would happen? Well, Papa, it's heavy. It'll sink. Yeah. Yeah? Okay. Well, I don't think I want to break my back and throw it in, so I need you two guys to team up and throw this pumpkin in the creek. Of course, they loved it, right? They grab it, and they get close to the water's edge, and they lob it in, a big, huge splash, and what happens to the pumpkin? It's floating. Wait a minute. Guys, what's going on here? So what did we do? We ended up having a really cool conversation that they helped create about buoyancy, and Sri guessed after a little bit of further questioning that there must have been air in the pumpkin, Papa, that was allowing it to float. So you really do have a lot of opportunity. You don't know it's going to emerge, but it shows up in terms of creativity and problem solving when you have these moments with a child. So big Halloween, I had to make sure I included my pumpkin story with Sri and Kai. So again, back to you, Brian. Maybe a story that comes up for you where you had a really fun, spontaneous experience, with a child. Because you too, Brian, as you know, are very elder-like with the behaviors you're demonstrating in the world. I'm absolutely certain of that. So I think young people can be inspired by you, Brian, because of the quality of elder you bring to that young adult mind. So perhaps you have a particular moment you'd like to share that comes to mind with someone younger.
Yeah, I'm going to think about that for a sec.
Okay.
There was actually there was something else that I had inspiring my mind.
Okay. Good.
And
Go for it. Yeah.
it was just occurring to me. I did really enjoy your story there, and even before you shared that, I was thinking about how all the past topics that we've talked about on the ReWilding Conversations podcast, like art of questioning, storytelling, getting into nature and being in the moment, using your senses, all these different themes that we come back to over and over again. These are all things that elders do really, really well. They tell stories, they ask questions, they listen deeply. People who have a lifetime of experience, and they've had moments of making mistakes. They've been humbled, so many times that they bring this more this deeper listening ability to the conversation. And I think that there's so many of these what I might call like elder qualities. They just have such a tremendous gift to bring to kids, to bring to adults, to bring to everyone, and it's just it's a really great resource that we have in our communities to just to have elders there.
Oh, yes, and truly an untapped resource. Truly for people any age in the community to reach out. And as you've already alluded to several times skillfully in this conversation, bring the elders to the event. Get them to be present. They will find a way to eloquently share. But reach out to them, because for some time we have abandoned our connectivity to those really wise souls. And when we look at modern day life, we see the evidence of that. We see an overabundance of evidence that where's the wisdom? Where's the conservation? Where's the simplicity? Where's the satisfaction for things that are really low cost and organically friendly? Where did that go? We created a synthetic world from the Industrial Revolution, and the elders, meanwhile, were watching and saying, "This is not the world I grew up in." So let's get, if one of the results of this podcast, Brian, could be that the listeners, any one of our listeners, gets an aha moment and says, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to do it." I'm going to do what? I'm going to reach out to so-and-so in my community, my grandpa, my grandma, anybody, and say, we're doing something together with one of the kids I know. I assure you, cool things will happen for everybody involved, because they will bring, as you've already said, a rich repertoire of past experiences to the experience, to the event. And I would very much welcome our listeners to contact you or I, or leave a comment on the ReWilding Facebook page, Conversations Facebook page, on what's a time that you've shared a cool moment. If you're an elder, or if you know an elder, share a time or something cool with a child that you've done something in nature. Share it, because that's going to catalyze more people to get novel ideas and to do cool things with across generations. And I know we're talking a lot about elders, but you hit it early enough in the podcast. Anybody that's a bit older than the child. I have seen teenagers serve as, quote, elders with very young children, and do it remarkably skillfully. They listen, they provide their own unique spin, and the little child lights up in the presence of the teenager. It's kind of like that older brother, older sister syndrome. That's cross-generation. That's intergenerational stuff. So we don't have to look at the two ends of the spectrum. There's many points within the spectrum of intergenerational experiences that I hope our listeners try to remember and look for opportunities to do.
Yeah, that's I love that. I mean, communities and having a healthy culture, having a healthy community that you live in. Communities are a lot like forests, where if you look at a healthy forest, and you can actually tell how healthy a forest is by looking at the ages of the trees and looking for something called age distribution, which basically means that in a healthy forest, you're not going to have all the trees the same age. So sometimes if you encounter a forest where all the trees have been clear-cut and then a new forest grew up in its place, you'll notice that all the trees are young and they're all like pretty much about the same age, especially if it was planted. This is very different. Like, you can go into other forests and find that there's all really big trees, and there's no young trees, and there's no middle-aged trees, because that's a forest where somebody has actually come in and selectively cut out the younger trees in order to enable the biggest trees to get even bigger. But if you go into like a healthy, like a natural forest, the way it actually works in nature, when it's really at its most ecologically diverse, you will find trees that are really old. You'll find trees that are brand new. You'll find trees in everywhere in between, in the Middle Ages, and I really think that it's a great metaphor for how the kind of cultural environment that human beings thrive in best. And, when you remove, say, the elders from the community, or when you remove the kids from the community, or you remove the Middle Ages, that has an effect on the health of everybody in that culture. And we thrive best when we have a fully functioning, diverse ecosystem of people at all different ages interacting with us and weaving together and sharing ideas. And there's a lot that happens through that.
Wow. Yeah, you're hitting it. You're nailing it. The diversity piece socially and in the human community. I'm just finishing one of my favorite books of the year, The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben. And he talks just about what you're saying, that and when one looks in the landscape of forests, you need the young, you need those saplings, you need the little emerging ones that only come out after a big hot fire. You need all these different types of species flourishing, and otherwise you get the other extreme, monoculture, which is the antithesis of a healthy, sustainable ecosystem. So, really nice, Brian, really nice. Let's hope we can invite some of our listeners to look around their local community and say, how might I, given a gift I have, no matter what my age is, how might I join some connectivity to my local community? Because I bring, no matter what age I am, I bring unique gifts to this tribe, my local community. We do need more comfort in stepping out. We do need to be encouraged and invited to step out. If you don't take your own initiative, the world's not going to take your hand and pull you from your keyboard and pull you from the comfort of a warm home. You've got to step out. So I'm glad I'm kind of getting to this. I'm teaching a mindfulness class, and then I'm saying to the kids over and over again, the juniors in the school I'm teaching, yeah, reading about mindfulness is cool, and yeah, come to this class once a week, and that's going to be good. But honestly, I'd rather you skip the class and do mindfulness. Do it.
Right.
So if anyone's motivated from listening to this talk and steps out for half an hour today and does a micro nature immersion, and then that leads to a connection with their community around that, then you're nailing it. Step up and do it and take action, and lift yourself from some of the routines that you know are limiting you from feeling safe and comfortable and contributing to your community. We can do that in the world of nature. We'll thrive and be healthy and benefit when we look at how might I take some of my gifts and attributes and contribute to the diversity of my nature landscape.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I can follow that with another short little plug. So, sense of
go
place.
for it.
Yeah, sense of place. Regrettably, but let's change that. Let's not talk about regret. Let's talk about how might it be different. How do we gain a reconnection to our sense of place, our neighborhoods? If we're indoors too much, we're not out talking to ourselves, talking to each other. If we take a child outside, we help that child gain more awareness of their local space. So when you walk around a block with a child, when you spend a little bit of time physically outside with a child near where they live or where you live, they begin to recognize that their world is bigger than the man-made environment. So their brains begin to see and experience a world that has a sense of place. And the elder and anyone a little bit older than the very young child can be the gifter. You gift the child when you help that child experience a moment of wonder or discovery in their place. You help that child establish their sense of place in the world. And we know that this is psychologically very healthy for any human being. And we minimize acts of violence and of rage. We minimize unhealthy, bizarre behavior. Every time we get a child out in its place and in its space, that child is less likely to act out. Aberrant behavior diminishes when a child is introduced to the fresh air, the light, and organic healthy elements of their ecosystem. There's a lot of research emerging today showing that. So, sense of place. I'm glad I had a chance to get those words out because they're really powerful. And again, the teenager, the young adult, the middle-aged person, and the elder, all of them can contribute to a child gaining a healthy sense of place in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple things floating around in my head at the moment, and one of them is just sort of building on what you're saying there, just how so much of our experience of having a sense of place in the place that we live, it comes both from experiences that we have in that place with the people who love us, but then it also comes from stories. Like, I think so much about how, to imagine what it would be like to be like a little kid growing up in a community of people that lives off the land, and you've only been exploring that place for like maybe 5 or 10 years. But the elders in that community and really anyone who's older than you in that community, they've been exploring that place for, sometimes 50, 60, 70 years. And they have, knowledge of that land in the form of stories. And they can tell you when, like, say, one year they take you down to the lake and you're spending time down the lake, and they tell you about all the animals they've encountered at that lake, and they tell you about the different experiences that they've had on that landscape. And suddenly this kid who has a fairly limited scope of knowledge about that place is starting to see layers of history, just from listening to the stories of the elders. And so I think that's one of the really amazing things that happens. And this is something that I noticed at like Wilderness Awareness School, how alive the stories of the people are on that landscape, especially on the actual land where the school is located. They've been teaching awareness and naturalist skills and survival skills on that landscape for a few decades now. And which really isn't all that much time, but even in that time, there's so many stories that have been accumulated about that landscape that there's an oral tradition that gets passed on to each new student who goes through that school, and it's really it really changes. The time that I spent at that school, was not decades. But I feel like I know that place in layers that move through multiple decades, and so it really has the potential to build a lot of connection really fast when the elders are sharing their stories.
So another component of being alive and being a human that touches all generations is that value and love, that need and that experience of love and affection. So the moment an infant is born, its sensory experience requires love and affection. And we see how women more often, but fathers as well, just naturally gift and give away remarkable amounts of love and affection to a very young child. One of the things that happens that we may overlook, so it's not going to be overlooked in this conversation, is when anyone shares time with a younger child, elements of love and affection will emerge. That child will experience some level of love and affection, if only because you've taken time to be with them. All right? That child will not experience that love and affection in the great majority of electronic experiences that we are saturating them with today. So only can that love and affection occur within a human relationship. So let's remember the great gift we give each other. And that love and affection doesn't come just from the teenager to the child, from the mom or dad to the child, or from the grandparent or the elder to the child. That's a synergistic thing. That's something that comes both ways. When my grandchildren come in and run up to me and give me a hug, who the heck else runs up to me on the sidewalk in a supermarket and gives me a hug? Oh, only my grandchildren. What a gift. Are you kidding me? So let's remember the remarkable value of love and affection in intergenerational experiences, and let's know that we catalyze that even greater when we introduce a natural setting to that experience.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome, Dave.
Well, let's see. I don't know. I'm willing to feel really grateful to have had this opportunity to talk today, Brian. I feel every now and then we really nail it, and there's great synergy and there's great depth. And I think this may have been one of our deepest experiences. I could be gifted significantly if some one or two people find a way to get back to us and tell us what they thought. Because, in fact, we are about, why do we do this? We do this because this is satisfying to you and I. We know that, Brian. But at a greater level, we do this to catalyze change. The podcast exists as a catalytic vehicle to invite others to step up and be all they can be. I just feel grateful to be in this relationship, and I feel grateful that we have people in our lives, some friends of mine, Maddie and Steph, and friends of yours that help us get the podcast out. So, to whatever degree we can someday touch a little more skillfully that reciprocity within the relationship that we have with our listeners. I'm looking for novel ideas. So if there's any listener out there that can think of even one novel idea of really how can we catalyze some reciprocity in our relationship as listener and podcast presenter, please do share it, because I know Brian and I are very much open to that.
Yeah, I would love to hear, if anyone's listening and you're trying to, think about different ways of weaving elders into your life, whether it's your personal, like your family, and you want to just, find ways of helping your parents interact more deeply with your children, or you're starting a nature school and you're brainstorming some ideas about how to make that work. We would love to hear what you're working on and the kinds of where this podcast is taking you in terms of your thinking about creating those facilitating those intergenerational experiences. We would love to hear what you're working on.
So let's express gratitude. I'm feeling very grateful for this time, and I feel grateful for all the listeners that are out there, and looking forward to continued moments of evidence that we as a species are stepping up and getting it. We're acting a little more wisely, along with some of the people in our past families and traditions.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Dave, for a great conversation, and we'll talk to everybody next time.